We basically look at German tank sizes compared as 3D models. This is going to blow my mind because I'm not really as cultured as I'd like to be. I like to visit like more museums to actually see the sizes of these vehicles. But I know in comparison to the Panzer II and 1, compared to like the Tiger and the Panther, the difference is massive. Anyway, light tanks, 0 to 15 tons. Apparently, I learned this recently, but the sizes of tanks, light, medium, and heavy, were standardized by the Italians. What was qualified as a light, medium, heavy was based on the tonnage amounts, but these definitions were defined by the Italians. The more you know, eh? What the hell is this? What the hell is this? The prototype, one was ever made. Okay, well, that explains that. A 2-ton. Okay, the problem with this is it cannot get over any bumps. Flat terrain, deserts and plains, nothing else. Produced none. It was just a prototype. Well, they didn't even make a prototype. The Panzerjäger 1 tank destroyer in service 1940, 1941. So they converted basically the Panzer 1s into a tank destroyer. Made 202 of these. The first German tank destroyer in service in the Second World War. It was intended to counter the heavy French tanks like the Char B1. Okay, interesting. That's one element in Hoi 4 you don't really see that much of. There's no reason to like make a certain tank to counter an enemy tank, is that you just kind of make one design a tank, don't you? Or maybe I do, you don't. I like this Orion wagon. I want to call it the onion wagon. Every bone in my body wants to say onion. One prototype made. So this was to compete in the First World War against the British Mark IV, Mark V. Kampfwagen M28 light tank. It looks a little bit like an armored car. Oh, that's interesting. The fact behind that. Apparently this was made in secret after 1990, the Treaty of Versailles, due to not allowing them to have tanks. It was made with Swedish and German armies. They only made 6 prototypes, so it didn't really get very far. The Marienwagen. 1 prototype was made. It's like a land battleship. So the early designs of tanks was the idea of a concept of moving a battleship from the sea onto land. So multiple turrets, multiple machine guns, very large vehicle that maneuvers forward slowly on the battlefield that can control the battlefield. But of course, the preciseness of artillery in the Second World War mean that a single shot would knock this out, therefore rendering it useless. So the idea was to try and make a more compact design, because that would obviously less likely be hit. The light tractor, 4 of these was produced. A light tank, 1939 and 45. I don't think this is in Hoi 4. The light Kampfwagen, the second, 2 prototypes. Okay, we're still in prototype territory, boys. 8.9 tons. We have a proper tank. 2,000 of these babies was produced. It was the most numerous tank in German panzer divisions at the beginning of the war against the Western Allies in the Soviet Union. You see, right now, I'm not sure if they accidentally did this, but they've actually created a modern tank design here, haven't they? An actual proper panzer. They're trying to keep the model relatively small. It's even got like sloped armor in places as well. Not fully sloped, obviously. The tracks are fully exposed, so therefore they're vulnerable to shots from anti-tank rifles, which was a problem later in the war, particularly in the Eastern Front. The barrel is relatively short as well, limits its capabilities of firing long-range, accurate shots against other tanks and penetrating their armor, which obviously later on at tank-on-tank battles, that will change. Sturm Panzer 1 Bison. This was a Panzer II converted to an SPG. 38 were made of it. Only 38. Okay. The Panzer 38T. So these were Czech tanks that were converted for German usage. We've got a slightly longer barrel now, and we have 1,400 of these in total. I might be wrong, actually. These may not be Czech tanks, but my understanding is the original design was Czech. But look, to produce 1,400 of these, well, at least have made some of these in Germany, right? It was outclassed by Soviet T-34s. Medium tank, so anything more than 15 tons is a medium tank with their Hetzer, which also looks like a tank destroyer. It made almost 3,000 of these. Okay. So this would have been a tank specifically used to counter enemy tanks, wouldn't it? Specifically like an anti-tank tank design. To use a light tank chassis, it shows desperation. You're not making a full model from the ground up. And with that in mind, you're making it to counter a certain other tank on the battlefield. I wonder if this was to counter T-34s. Jade Panzer 38T. So this is a self-propelled artillery. Only 30 of these were made. When you look at the numbers they produced, they didn't even make that many of them. So we've got 1916 to 1970. It looks like a penny farthing bicycle. 1 prototype was made. I bet it didn't even move. The Skoda T25 was an attempt to design and build a tank that would be an effective opponent to the T34. Blueprints only. The Flak Panzer, so we have an anti-air tank. 5 of these were produced. So once again, these numbers are so small. The Stug 3, 10,000 of these were made. Built on the chassis of the Panzer III tank, replacing the turret with armored fixed turret. It is an anti-tank weapon. The Nashorn also looks like an SPG. No, it's a tank destroyer. It's an open tank destroyer. See, the top is open. Could frontally penetrate any allied tank as long as at range. On the 6th of March 1945, a US Army M26 Pershing was knocked out at close range at 100-300 meters. The Mobile Wagon, self-propelled anti-air gun, 240 mate. Okay, this is the highest amount of anti-air tank. 45 of the Ostwinds. The Panzer IV turret was replaced with an open-top hexagon turret. Was housed in a 3.7 centimeter Flak 43, highly effective against aircraft and light vehicles. When you ever use one of these in, like, let's say Battlefield 1942 or any other variants of that game, it was always difficult to aim low to the ground with these turrets because the turret was so mounted so high that you could only really aim it at things downwards if you were like on a hill edge with an incline and shooting downwards. I wonder if there were an actual difficult issue the captains or the pilots of these vehicles had during the war. Panzer IV, we have 8,500 of these boys and all tank variants. Why would it include all variants though? That seems a bit of a strange number. The only German tank to remain in both production and combat throughout the war, World War II, comprised of 30% of the Wehrmacht's total tank strength. 30% total strength. It's got the skirts on it as well. These were added later on. Once again, just to counter anti-tank rifles, which can knock out the tracks, which will immobilize the tank. The Sturm Panzer, a heavy assault gun. The barrel of this is really short. With heavies, more than 30 tons is considered heavy boy. The A7V, so once again another prototype, World War II. They did produce 20 of these though. The only tanks produced in Germany World War II to be used in combat. The crew officially consists of 17 soldiers and one of 17 soldiers to man the vehicle. The A7VU, another prototype, 1918. So the Germans did try and make quite a lot of different prototypes for tanks. Can you imagine this though? This would barely get 2 miles an hour. You could walk faster than this tank. And here we've got the big boy, the Panther. Everyone says this is like their favorite tank of World War II. This is like almost the prototype for every modern tank. It says medium heavy tank. 6,000 of those were made. Intended to counter the Soviet T-34, replace the Panzer IV and 3 and 4. One of the best tanks in the World War II for excellent firepower and protection. It's got sloped armor as well on the front. Not on the back though. If you look at the way it looks as well, it does represent like a modern tank of today, doesn't it? I heard the issue with this tank, the biggest problem with it is a lot of the parts used in the previous Panzer IIIs and Panzer IVs weren't compatible with the Panthers. So whenever one of these vehicles broke down, they would specifically have to get parts that were tailored only for Panthers. It was always better to have a full tank army consist of multiple tanks that use similar equipment types. So therefore, if one broke down of a certain issue, it could be replaced interchangeably among different tanks. The Jade Panther. So we have a tank destroyer variant of the Panther, only slightly heavier as well. Has a good powerful power to weight ratio and a powerful main gun, enabling crews to destroy any type of allied tank manned by crude fire. 400 produced. The Tiger tank. This is made famous from a lot of American movies, isn't it? And I feel like this tank, almost like when you see it, it represents like Germany in World War II, doesn't it? Like the design of it just like immediately thinks of World War II, even though in comparison to the Panther, 6,000 Panthers were made, but only 1,300 Tigers were actually built. So Panthers did make up the majority of them. Maybe the reason why this one represents Germany World War II, because more of these were on the Western Front, because this was a heavier tank, so it was more for defensive purposes. I heard one of the issues they had with tanks later in the war, with Tigers later in the war, is that the engine had a really hard time moving the weight of the vehicle. The first German heavy tank in World War II, 100 frontal armor, 60mm on the sides to face with the strength of the Soviet armor like the KV-1. The 65-ton Elefant, 91 of it. You always see this in RTS games. And the Sturm Tiger too. This is a rocket launcher. This is something you can't make in Hoi 4. It's got a single barrel rocket launcher. You can't make this in Hoi. Well, actually, no. Maybe you... let me think about that for a second. I'm thinking of the secondary rocket launchers, like the Sherman rocket launcher. No, actually, you can make this in game, but it's crap. Don't ever do it. Only 18 of these are made. Once again, you see these in RTS games so frequently. They always have like massive destructive power. Provides heavy fire support for infantry in urban areas, capable of demolishing heavily defended buildings and fortified areas with a single shot. I read more about this one. It took like over a minute to reload it though. You know, the thing I think what's missing from Hoi 4 is that if you are using rockets, maybe rockets should work more efficiently in urban regions. What they should do is rocket tanks should have attack bonuses attacking into urban, like fortified regions. Because that was the purpose of this tank. It even says it in the description below that this tank is used to demolish urban regions. So what they should do is that rocket tanks do the same damage, but have massive attack bonuses attacking into urban and forts. That would be a perfect use of them, wouldn't it? The King Tiger. It always reminds me of the first Call of Duty, because you steal a King Tiger and you ride it to like a German fortified area. You try and do as much damage. It's one of those stupid on-rails sequences. Once again, everything I read about this tank is it had an absolute nightmare nightmare moving over a lot of train types because the engine was strained by the massive amount of weight of the vehicle. It looks like a modern tank though, doesn't it? The Jade Tiger, the heavy tank destroyer. It destroyed 11 Sherman tanks with only one loss to P-47 fighters. That's interesting. Super heavy tanks, 80 tons up to 1,000 tons. This category is really big. K-Wagon, super heavy. 2 prototypes were made. Bet that we never saw action though. If it says prototypes, my presumption is never saw action. Karl Jurat. So this is this like a railway artillery? Is it even considered a tank? What is this? VK-72 super heavy tank. Blueprints, never was built. Look at that barrel though. The E-100 super heavy tank. One partial prototype. Partial. The first prototype of the Tiger Mouse was not fully completed and was found by 751 Field Artillery Battalion of the American Forces in April 1945. So they partially constructed one of them. How would you authorize this kind of vehicle at this late stage of the war? Look at the size of the bloke compared to the size of the tank. He's so small. How would you authorize this in 1943? I think probably what happens is they work on so many prototypes simultaneously until they find something that feels like the most effective for the battlefield and then put that into mass production. I imagine this would be effective at pushing into like fortified regions. Would it though? Because you'd throw a Molotov cocktail on it, wouldn't you? I don't know. The Mouse. 2 of these was produced. Some historians believe that if enough of them had produced and deployed, the Mouse could have changed the outcome of World War II. What? I heard the biggest concern with this. I know it's a defensive vehicle, but the problem with this is, one, it's a sit-in duck for artillery. Other issue, it's a sit-in duck for airstrikes, which of course Germany didn't have air superiority at the end of the war, so those rocket firing fighter planes that the Allies were using in the war would have completely annihilated this. The third thing, this can't pass over like 90% of bridges because it's too heavy. So this vehicle would basically move a tiny little bit to get into position and then never move again. The Panzer IX was a German silhouette tank drawn in the German World War II signal magazine to fool the Allies of counterintelligence. Oh, come on. I'm not buying this as well. So this was basically something they showed in a magazine to like dupe the Allies, right? The Panzer X never outpassed the artists or the drawings of the rounded tanks for the printed only the German magazines of signal. Oh, it looks so stupid. It actually looks like it should be on the ocean. You know what I mean? Okay, super ultra heavy tanks above 1,000 tons. Okay, we're moving into slight fictional territory here. The Swerve Gustav railway gun. Okay, this is not even a tank anymore. Whoa. Amazing. The Land Kreiser P1000 Rat, super heavy tank. The project gained approval of Adolf Hitler, who had expressed interest in developing a tank, but was cancelled by the Ministry of Armaments Albert Speer in early 1943. It is literally a land battleship. Do you know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of the Mammoth tank from Command and Conquer, with the double barrel as well. The Land Cruiser P... We've reached the land of fiction now, boys. This video was like really serious up to this point. Now it's just got really silly. It's got stabilizers as well. You know, one of the biggest concerns with these tanks, particularly the railway guns, I know this was a concern with the railway guns, but because the vehicle and the cannon behind it was so unbelievably massive, every time the train fired a shot, it would damage the chassis of the actual train itself. It only had the capabilities of firing like 100 shots before the cracks started to form in the chassis of the vehicle. So let's be real with you. We've just scaled up the railway gun now by like 3 or 4 times. Keith, this problem will be scaled up 3 or more times from that point onward as well. You know what I mean? This would fire basically 2 shots before the chassis cracked. And hence the reason why it's got stabilizers. Oh, look, Donald Duck. The full roster of all the tank boyos. Please ignore the top row. Apart from the railway gun, but that's not a tank anyway. I think the railway gun is good to have there as a reference point. The other 2 tanks are just silly. To be fair, those last 2 are silly as well. Anyway, you want to see more reactions of World War II content? Subscribe for more of that content. And what? You want more World War II goodness? Or maybe Hoi-4 goodness? We'll give this video a try. This might be right up your alley. You know what, actually? I made this video just for you. Give it a click.